In the 1980s, two men created a phenomenon which made them celebrities.
It suddenly became a craze.
We outsold Roald Dahl, which was a major achievement at the time.
There were bestsellers lists, not just of children's books, but also all books.
But the events leading up to that extraordinary moment owe everything to one game, Dungeons and Dragons.
Wow, this game was absolutely unbelievable. You know, there's never been anything like it before. Games Workshop, we were at the centre of all this because we had the game on the strength of an initial order of 6 copies of Dungeons and Dragons.
On the back of that order, we got a 3-year exclusive distribution agreement for Europe. It was ridiculous, really.
At the time, we'd been running Games Workshop out of a flat. It was making a dribble of money.
The phone would always ring, and our landlord at the time, he'd always get to the phone before us. And you want Games Workshop, do you? I'd kind of hang up and get really angry and stuff. And so we end up having to leave.
But flats were not important at the time. What we needed was an office.
Steve had a van called Van Pearson. And so we found a small office the side of a bread bin in Shepherd's Bush, the back of an estate agent's.
Well, we lived in my van. Then go to the bread bin that was Games Workshop and stay in there, working till 7, 8 o'clock at night. So the whole thing was growing and growing.
With Games Workshop firmly established at the centre of the latest hobby, they hit upon another idea, almost by chance.
We used to hold events called Games Day. And at one particular Games Day in 1980, we had stands for outside companies, one of which was Penguin Books.
Geraldine Cook was the editor at the time, who was there, and we said to her, Geraldine, you ought to be publishing a book on role-playing games, because look at all the interest there is.
So she asked Steve and I if we could write a book about the hobby of role-playing.
We got to the bit about how do you teach role-playing, how do you teach the concept of role-playing? And it occurred to us that the way to do it was to have a little mini adventure where you turned left, turn right, and you just, simple thing, and you came across some treasure there. But then the more we thought about it, the more that was a much more interesting concept than doing the manual.
And so we came up with the concept of Fighting Fantasy, an interactive book in which you, the reader, are the hero. This is the brain-aching methodology we have to go through to create a Fighting Fantasy game book. And then as the adventure unfolds, the reader starts to find items which will be useful later on. They have to overcome monsters, solve the puzzles. So it's part game, part book, part puzzle.
It's the whole package for Fighting Fantasy, and we were very lucky to get probably the best fantasy artists in the country. Just by opening up the book on any page, you got it. It suddenly brought the whole role-playing thing back to basics. Anybody could play these books.
We got the call from Penguin Books saying, hey, we need 2 more. I think we've hit on something here.
Fighting Fantasy took off in a way that we'd never expected.
When Death Trap Dungeon came out in 1984, I think it sold like 400,000 copies in the UK alone.
To see in the Sunday Times, first, second and third in the children's bestseller charts, that was fantastic.
Fighting Fantasy exploded globally, brought fantasy role-playing to a wider audience, and springboarded everyone involved in it to new heights.
You see people on the tube today with their iPhone. Back in my day, they were holding a Fighting Fantasy game book.